It was a war that many people around the world barely noticed, but for those living through it, it changed everything. Two neighboring countries, once connected by history, culture, and even political systems, suddenly found themselves locked in a brutal conflict. Trenches stretched across dry landscapes. Soldiers faced each other in positions that barely moved for months. Families were divided. Entire communities were caught in a war that felt both sudden and deeply rooted in the past. So how did Ethiopia and Eritrea, two countries with such a close history, end up fighting one of Africa's deadliest modern wars? What was this conflict really about? And why did it become known as one of the most intense but hidden wars of its time? To understand this, we have to go back before the war even began. Eritrea was not always an independent country. For many years, it was linked to Ethiopia in different ways. During the late 19th century, Eritrea became an Italian colony, while Ethiopia remained independent. After World War II, control of Eritrea shifted again, and eventually it was federated with Ethiopia. But this arrangement did not last. In 1962, Eritrea was formally annexed by Ethiopia, turning it into a province. This decision sparked a long and difficult struggle. Eritrean groups began fighting for independence, leading to a decades-long conflict known as the Eritrean War of Independence. That war lasted for more than 30 years. Finally, in 1991, Eritrean forces succeeded in gaining control, and by 1993, Eritrea officially became an independent nation after a referendum. At that moment, relations between Eritrea and Ethiopia were relatively positive. There was hope that the two countries, after years of conflict, could move forward peacefully. But that peace did not last. Tensions began to grow over a number of issues. One of the biggest problems was the border between the two countries. During earlier periods of colonial and imperial rule, borders had not always been clearly defined on the ground. Maps existed, but they were often vague or inconsistent. As long as relations were friendly, these issues were manageable. But as disagreements over trade, currency, and political influence increased, the border issue became more serious. Both countries began to assert claims over certain areas, especially a region known as Badme. At first, the situation involved small clashes. Local forces confronted each other. Tensions rose, but instead of calming down, the conflict escalated. In 1998, full-scale war broke out. What followed surprised many observers because instead of a limited border conflict, it turned into a large-scale conventional war. Both countries mobilized their armies, sending tens of thousands of troops to the front lines. Trench warfare became a defining feature of the conflict. Much like wars seen in earlier parts of the 20th century, soldiers dug into fixed positions. They faced each other across heavily fortified lines, launching assaults that often resulted in heavy casualties but little territorial change. The fighting was intense and costly. Both sides used artillery, tanks, and air power. Battles were fought over relatively small pieces of land, but the human cost was enormous. Tens of thousands of soldiers were killed, and many more were injured. Civilians were also affected. People living near the border were displaced. Families were separated as tensions increased between the two countries. In some cases, individuals were expelled or forced to leave based on their nationality or background. Despite the scale of the war, it received limited global attention compared to conflicts in other regions. This is one reason why it's often described as a hidden conflict. The war continued until 2000. By that time, both sides had suffered significant losses. Eventually, a ceasefire agreement was reached, followed by the Algiers Agreement, which formally ended active fighting. An international commission was set up to examine the border dispute and make a final decision. The commission later ruled on the status of contested areas, including Badme, but the decision did not fully resolve the situation. Although the war had ended, tensions remained high. Both countries maintained large military forces along the border. The region became heavily militarized with a tense standoff that lasted for years. This period is often described as no war, no peace. There were no major battles, but the conflict was never truly resolved. Political relations remained strained. Communication was limited. The possibility of renewed fighting always existed. So when we ask what this war was really about, the answer is not simple. On the surface, it was a border dispute, a disagreement over where exactly the line between two countries should be drawn. But beneath that, there were deeper issues. There were questions of national identity, especially for Eritrea as a newly independent state. There were economic disagreements, including trade and currency policies. And there was the legacy of past conflicts which shaped how both sides viewed each other. All of these factors combined to turn a small border disagreement into a full-scale war. The Ethiopian Eritrean War shows how even small disputes can escalate when trust breaks down and tensions are not resolved early. It also shows how history, identity, and politics can turn neighboring countries into adversaries. Years later, efforts were made to improve relations. In 2018, leaders from both countries signed a peace agreement, officially ending the state of conflict. Borders were reopened, and there were signs of reconciliation. But the legacy of the war still remains. Communities that were affected continue to deal with its consequences. Memories of the conflict are still fresh for many people, and the region's stability continues to depend on maintaining that fragile peace. Looking back, this war stands as one of the most intense but less widely discussed conflicts of the modern era. It reminds us that not all major wars dominate global headlines. Some remain in the background, even as they shape the lives of millions. And it shows that even after the fighting stops, the impact of war can continue for years, quietly influencing the future long after the world has moved on.